And we're back. So, getting back to our tracksuit neighbors, we have Mo and Mitch. Really cute, the both of them having M names. And Mitch is played by Richard Kind. Every time he's hysterical. He's been hysterical for years. I've seen him in a number of other shows, but the one that always sticks out the most for me is Big Mouth. Also available on Netflix. But just something about his cranky demeanor just makes everything that comes out of his mouth funny, even though it's supposed to be menacing at times. So we have these two nosy neighbors who you could see anything that these new neighbors of the Brownocks are just annoying them, the living crap out of them. And then slowly we're introduced to the other neighbors, Mia Farrow and I believe who plays her. Yes, Jasper is her brother, played by Terry Kinney. I've also seen him in a number of films. He also does brilliantly, playing a little off the wall. And so all these very interesting characters, especially this particular character, Jasper. He's mentally ill, suffered some form of trauma, and has reverted to a childlike state. And there's just this, I think it's called dummy door. Hold on a second. Correction, dumb waiter. Which I don't necessarily know why. I think there's some form of explanation that you can Google, but that's what for some reason Jasper is attracted to and feels safe in and very childlike in there. And his sister is the one that always has to kind of fetch him out. Which is not something that they noticed as they went to the open house for this home, but didn't like see a connection of possibly him wanting to hide in there until much later. So they do eventually kind of go for it and take out money and loans that they can't afford, just because the house again at that point. Now I don't necessarily know for this film if it takes place in now current years and how the economy is, but the real stories takes place in 2014. And so again, the economy fluctuates and inflation fluctuates often. And I think we were just recovering in 2014 from the market crash. So it was a great opportune time for that family to invest. And so they got the house, not relatively cheap, but not necessarily over the top expensive for such a magnitude of the square footage that they got. So these folks are able to buy it for 3 point something million, but it's their dream house and everything seems just perfect. The from the way that the structure is on the inside, the interiors, she's in love with it. The wife, Nora is in love with everything inside. In fact, that she's like feels liberated. She's finally free from New York, although she had always felt that she needed to be in New York to be an artist and to be successful, but she's embracing her suburban self and everything is going without a hitch. Now, I will say though, I don't know if the wardrobe, because remember, wardrobe also influences the story, and I always was kind of intrigued by why is it that these two, particularly the parents, are always dressed in this like really blah blank canvases of like white, egg white shell of white or beige. Nothing really. I mean, maybe I think Dean, who's played by Bobby here, had a couple of hints of color, but for the most part, they were pretty light. Now, I don't know if that's to reflect light versus darkness or innocence versus, everyone else who were in like darker colors for sure. Mia's character is definitely like in, and tell me that they didn't look like American Gothic. If you've seen the film, I mean, if you've seen the show, you'll see Pearl and Jasper, our brother or sister duo here, who have lived together for years. But there are instances with the way they're dressed, they look very American Gothic. That painting. dark colors, very sad face. And she's a little bit of a wackadoodle, let's just be, excuse the word, but she's a little bit of a wackadoodle when it comes to conservationists and horticulture, especially that couple duo for sure. They love planting, they love embracing their natural state of just, planting seeds and growing their own veggies. And here these people have come to disrupt that order and they're not having it. So as they're getting settled in, that's when the real story, and I tell you, that's like maybe in the first 45 minutes of watching, because then you see how that doesn't last. That's like a really quick honeymoon, and then before you know it, all hell breaks loose with their first introduction of that creepy ass letter that they get. And the letter just lets them know, like, welcome to the neighborhood and whatever, but then it quickly shifts to, my family has been watching this house for decades. My great grandfather or my grandfather, and then my father, and then now it's my turn. And and just the way that they've known where they have situated themselves in the house, how many children are in the house. I mean, you start to feel very vulnerable when people know certain things about you like that, you have not introduced or met anybody for them to know that information. So it quickly spirals into, let's, go to the police, which is what the couple did. But again, I from what I gather in doing my research, I think they were really creeped out from that letter, almost to the point where they just never even lived in the house. So it opens itself to creative license, and I think it was a wise choice by Ryan Murphy to have punches of so many horror movie classics like Psycho. I think of Amityville Horror. I think of Poltergeist. I think of all these great classics interjected here. Plus the neighbors too, the creepy ass neighbors. Very much, and also this very protective feeling that they have for the house feels very much like The Others. Have you ever seen that movie with Nicole Kidman? And it's like the ghosts revolting. I want to say that that's what you kind of go through. You go through almost 7 episodes of then, like, who done it? Who's the watcher? Who's the person who's been harassing these people and making them literally shake in their boots? All of a sudden, it just kind of cracks down on Dean's peace, and he can no longer even enjoy himself in the house because now he's constantly playing a cat and mouse game with who done it. And then the more he gets aggressive, which, not for no shade, I love the fact that he's such a New York, because I think we do that. I think that we often think, because we're so used to having this tough exterior in the city, because you have to survive in tough situations in the city, in the subway system, in the traffic, that you don't know how to code switch that sometimes. And then you've moved into the suburbs, and now it's a different animal, and these people are adjusted to a certain way of interacting, and you don't necessarily gravitate towards that. I mean, not for nothing, I've seen a lot of other male reviewers on YouTube who have said, like, I would have said the same thing. So you don't necessarily, I think, have to be a man, or you have to be from New York. Common sense just dictates you wouldn't be on somebody's property, but these people feel at liberty, especially that tracksuit duo, that they're like, we've been planning here since 20 something, for over 20 something years. You're not the first, and get out of our way, basically. And very rude, but he's like, you're on my property one more time, I'm not having it. I'm not having it. And with Jasper, he threatens to, like, literally kick his ass. I can't tell you how many zingers are in this, and how many funny, even though it's very on the horror movie kind of field, there are instances and punches of comedy here. Also, we are introduced, which I will say, she stole the show for me. Their private detective of Theodora, played by Noma Dumenswini. and again, forgive me if I'm butchering your name, but she stole the show for me. She was just so eloquent. I love the way they dressed her. She always had this beautiful headscarf and these gorgeous gloves, and they all varied. That's what I'll say about her. She was a multitude of rainbow of colors. And because this couple is so desperate, they know that their local department is a little on the lazy side, and so their police department, and so they're not getting what they want, which is who is doing it. Even the wife is like, why can't you have this, this envelope and letter better, I don't know, examined for DNA, for the saliva, for whatever. And of course, you get our typical captain here, played by Christopher McDonald, Detective Roke. And I love him because I always think of Thelma and Louise because thankfully we didn't get the southern accent, but nonetheless, I always think of him in that role. But yes, he's very kind of like, well, that's going to take about a month and whatever, but hire yourself a private detective. And that's when they hire Noma's character, Theodora. And she's so lovely. There's so many moments also where she accentuates and enunciates when she says Shangri-La. I loved her. I was like, ooh, I need more of her. I need more of her somewhere. Please put her in American Horror Stories or something. And she is from the Ryan Murphy canon because I was like, where have I seen this woman before? She looks so familiar. And I thought that I had seen her. And it turned out it was another actress, which I also recommend. This show is also on Netflix. It is titled The Haunting of Bly Manor, and it's another very creepy ghost, like perfect for Halloween. But that's not where I had seen her. I had seen her and believe it or not, she did stand out to me enough for me to remember her. She was in Pose. She played Electra's mom. So I think it's the final season. Yes, it's like the final season, and Electra, I think, finally or lets it be known by accident that she is transgender, and I think she was starting out as like a sex worker so she could pay for certain things, and her mom catches her, and it's a very hard watch, but she stood out for me, and she's a British actor, but I think her family's from Africa. And it's just, oh, I loved her accent. And then she plays marvelously here as the detective to get down to the nitty gritty. The way she breaks down everything, she just does a thorough job, which is so funny because she even admits she's not. She was never a police officer. In fact, she was a jazz singer, and then she had like an alcoholic problem. She was an alcoholic, and but somehow she's able to recuperate, and I'll let y'all watch that so you can know how she is able to pry herself away from that addiction. But she falls in love with true crime and has a reputation of doing really well because she does get down to it. So that's why they keep insisting on hiring her. And plus also, she has horrible tragedy that she has cancer, so she wants to provide for her daughter who's a single mom. So but she's just lovely in this series, and I just anyway, I wish this series had more episodes anyway. But he hires her, the dean, the father of the family. Also, we are introduced to Karen, which is, I think she's brilliantly named here. And I think they did that like a little tongue-in-cheek type situation here. Because, I mean, again, what name didn't get the worst brunt of what we've been experiencing during COVID and Black Lives Matters protests than a Karen? A nosy ass Karen, no good. Sorry, anybody here whose their name is Karen, but you got dragged. You got dragged for this series, and rightfully so. Sorry. So she's played by Jennifer Coolidge, and she's brilliant here because she's very obnoxious, very much into Nora's business. They've known each other. They have a track history. They have been artists at one point. And she went through some pitfalls with her ex-husband, but for some reason she's on this insistence of like, girl, you need to sell this, if you're getting harassed and you're getting all types of crazy mail, you should consider, selling it, and sell it for real cheap. And then we kind of like realize her self-interest. That's why she was all up in the business. But that's one. And again, we go through so many episodes of who done it, who could it have been, who's the watcher, is it ghosts in the house. That's where we have also Joe Montello playing John Graff, which is based on a real story, not in this particular house, but something like this had happened. A case like this had really happened in the vicinity, not in the specifically in that area where this case took place with this whole watcher situation. But it was a well-to-do place where there were plenty of beautiful homes and mansions. And this man, I think his last name was List, John List, and I will link that also, that case in the description box, and how they caught him. They did catch him, but in the series you don't know that. So you're kind of left in this creepy state of like, oh God, what is this? But yes, to kind of he was one of these religious fanatics and was going through a lot in the situation. And I will say that real case happened in the 70s. It did not happen in 1995 like it did in this show, but he did eventually, off his family. And so, and then just split, got out of Dodge and left his family there. Anyway, I will let y'all read all that information. But again, this goes through a spiral, and then you don't know who really did it. Then we're introduced to another new neighbor towards the end of the series, which I think is brilliant. I love his voice. I've loved his voice for years. Roger Kaplan is the character played by Michael Nori, and he has this just the eeriest, it almost like Vincent Price but different kind of voice. And whenever you hear him speak, it's like ooh, creepy. But he plays Roger, who's been in love with houses since forever. And I know people like that I guess we all can say that to a certain degree, but he takes it to a whole new level. Like, he knows the architecture and the wood and all this. And this particular character loved houses so much that he was a public school teacher for, I think, literature, and he convinced his students to write letters about, and he called it Ode to a House, to whatever house that they were enamored by, and sent it to just an anonymous letter to that person, the owner. But in this case, I think it just turned into something else, and then before you know it, it went from an ode to a house